Hi, and thank you for tuning in to the Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth. If you're like me, you've probably heard a lot of sermons over the years, right? Now, I grew up in a home where my dad was a pastor. My mom worked as a lay person, but worked as a children's pastor for many years of my growing up. I married a pastor, and I'm a pastor, so imagine how many sermons I've heard over the years. But have you recognized that Jesus also preached sermons when he lived here on earth? There's one very particular one that you may be aware of in the book of Matthew. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. And over the next few days and weeks, I'm actually going to, with Pastor Nabil, we're going to dive deep into that sermon and really see what we can learn from Jesus' own teaching. How awesome, right? Now, what we're going to do today is I'm just going to read 2 verses to you from Matthew chapter 5. This is just giving us the context of where and when this is happening. And then over the next couple of weeks, we'll dive in a little deeper. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 1, it says, "Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and he sat down." But verse 2 makes it more personal. It says, "His disciples came to him and he began to teach them." So as we go through this over the coming weeks, think about that. This sermon was a very intimate, secluded crowd of the people that were closest to Jesus as he's teaching them about what it means to be a follower of his and what's different, contradicting to what people in this world believe about religion. Now, I want us to think a little bit about the context of what was going on that day. You see, during that day and age, there was these Pharisees and these scribes. They were religious elite. They took pride in flaunting how close they were to following the law and the standards of that day, and they were excited to pray in public and to do all of these things. But during that time, it caused the other people around them to compare themselves. And they felt like they couldn't live up to that standard. They felt like they couldn't measure up to these rules and these regulations that the Pharisees seemed to do so flawlessly. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever had times where you compared your prayer life to someone else's? You compared your moral struggles with someone else's, and you're like, you know what, I'm always messing up, but sister so-and-so, or that man I sit by at church, he seems to have it all together. You know, I've been there too. And when we compare ourselves to others sometimes, we can definitely feel like we're lacking and we can never do it on our own. But you know what, that's the start to recognizing what Jesus was trying to teach us through this sermon. He flipped the script on what it means to be close to God and what it means to have righteousness. So think today about what Jesus might be ready to teach as we dive in tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and we hope to see you again for another Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth.